A 99-year-old man was asked what surprised him most about life. He didn't mention love. He didn't mention loss. He didn't mention any of the things you'd expect, he said. How long I spent treating time like it was waiting for me to be ready. Sit with that, because somewhere in that sentence is the thing most people don't understand about time until it's far too late to do anything differently. And that's exactly what this is about. This channel exists to have the conversations that actually matter, the ones most people postpone until something forces them to stop postponing. This video is one of those conversations. Here is exactly what you'll walk away with. First, you'll understand why the way most people think about time is not just wrong, but quietly working against everything they say they want. Second, you'll see the specific shift in how a person relates to time that separates people who look back with peace from people who look back with regret. And it is not what anyone tells you it is. Third, you'll have one question to ask yourself tonight that will change how tomorrow feels before it even begins. This is not a productivity video. This is not a time management system. This is something older and more important than both of those things. Stay with this one. It earns its time. His name was Edmund. He turned 99 on a quiet Tuesday in the same house he had lived in for 61 years. His daughter had arranged a small gathering, close family, a few old friends, a table of food nobody was eating because they were all too busy watching him. Edmund had been a philosopher, not a famous one, the kind who spent 40 years teaching at a small university, writing things that were read by the people who needed them and ignored by everyone else. He was unbothered by both. What struck people who spent time with Edmund wasn't his certainty. It was his ease. There was no urgency in him that felt like anxiety, no stillness in him that felt like giving up. He occupied his own life in a way that most people, sitting across from him, realized they had never quite managed to occupy theirs. Someone once asked him when he had learned to be like that. He said he hadn't learned it. He had unlearned something else. And that distinction between learning a new way to live and unlearning a false one is the whole conversation we're about to have, because the most common mistake people make about time isn't that they waste it. That's the surface version. The deeper mistake is the belief that runs underneath every wasted hour, every postponed decision, every "I'll do it when." It's the belief that time is a hallway, that the present is just a corridor you walk through to get to the room where your real life is happening. Hold that image. The hallway. We're going to come back to it, because what Edmund understood, and what most people don't, turns that image completely inside out. The first thing Edmund understood: time is not a resource. Every productivity system, every life hack, every conversation about time management begins from the same assumption. That time is a resource. Something you have. Something you can save, spend, invest, waste, or optimize. And from that assumption flows an entire way of living. You plan your time. You protect your time. You feel guilty about how you spend your time. You resolve, repeatedly, to use it better. Edmund had a different view. And it's the one that changes everything. That he said time is not something you have. It is something you are inside of. The difference sounds small. It isn't. When you treat time as a resource, your relationship to the present moment becomes transactional. You're always asking, is this worth my time? Is this a good use of where I am right now? And underneath that question, always, is the assumption that the present is a cost, something being spent in exchange for a future return. Edmund noticed something about people who lived this way. They were always slightly elsewhere, physically present, mentally already at the next thing. Optimizing their way through a life they were too busy calculating to actually inhabit. He said the saddest version of a human life, in his observation, was not a short one. It was a long one lived entirely in anticipation. Someone who spent 90 years getting ready for the life they were going to live once everything was in order. The order never comes. That's not pessimism. That's just what he'd watched. And what comes next is the mistake that follows directly from this, the one most people are making right now, today, without knowing it. The second thing, the hallway problem. Think about the hallway image from earlier. Most people live as if the present is a hallway, a transitional space, somewhere between where they were and where they're going. The job is temporary. The apartment is temporary. The situation is temporary. The plan is to get to the room, the relationship, the career, the version of life that finally feels real, and start living properly once they arrive. Edmund had watched this across generations of students. Brilliant, earnest, deeply hopeful people who were always 3 steps away from beginning. That he used to ask them, What would you do differently if this, right now, today, exactly as it is, were the room? Graphic, a single door. No hallway, just the door, and behind it, the same life, lit differently, not a better room. Not the room you wanted. This room. The question made people uncomfortable. Because answering it honestly meant admitting that the hallway was a choice, that the waiting was a decision they were making, disguised as circumstances they were enduring. Here is what that actually means in daily life. Every time you say, when things settle down, you are standing in the hallway. Every time you defer something that matters because the conditions aren't quite right, hallway. Every time you treat today as a rough draft of life, you'll start living properly later, hallway. And here is the part most people miss. The hallway doesn't lead to the room. The hallway is a habit. And habits don't end when circumstances change. They follow you into every new set of circumstances and quietly rebuild themselves there. The third thing is the one Edmund called the only genuinely useful thing he knew. And it's the one that shifts everything that came before it. The third thing. The difference between spending time and meeting at Edmund made a distinction that sounded strange at first. He said most people spend their time. A rare few meet it. Spending time is transactional. You allocate it to tasks, obligations, goals. You move through your hours as though ticking boxes on an inventory. At the end of the day, you account for it. Did you use it well? Did you waste it? Did you come out ahead? Meeting time is different. It means arriving fully in a moment without needing it to be something other than what it is. Not passive, not resigned, fully present, not because you've achieved some meditative state, but because you've released the low-level argument most people are having with the present at all times. The argument goes, this isn't where I'm supposed to be yet. This isn't the version of my life that counts. Cut to B-roll, hands wrapped around a coffee cup. Steam rising. No rush. Edmund told a story about a former student of his, a woman named Kara, who came to visit him when she was 62. She had been, by every measure, successful. Career, family, respected in her field. And she sat across from him with the specific exhaustion of someone who had arrived and felt nothing. She said, I did everything I planned. Why does it feel like I missed it? Edmund said he wasn't surprised. He said the life she described sounded like a very well-executed plan. But a plan, however good, is a map. And you can spend your entire life navigating perfectly and still never feel the ground under your feet. Kara had been so focused on getting somewhere that she had never quite arrived anywhere. What she had missed was not time. She had missed the texture of the time she had. The grain of ordinary Tuesdays. The weight of small moments that don't announce themselves as significant but are, in retrospect, the entire thing. Not roughly. Those are, exactly, the moments people describe on their deathbeds. Not the achievements. The textures. The ones that felt like nothing at the time. This is what Edmund had understood, slowly, over 9 decades. That the present moment is not a waiting room. It is the only room that will ever actually exist. And every future moment, when it arrives, will arrive as a present moment. Which means the skill of being in it is the only skill that matters across an entire lifetime. That be why the time most people understand this. They are looking back at the years they spent somewhere else. You don't have to wait that long. Remember the hallway, the image Edmund used when he asked his students, what would you do differently if this were the room? Here is what he said. The honest answer is always revealed, not a list of grand things. Not adventures or achievements or dramatic changes. Almost always, the answer was quieter than that. More present, more specific. People said things like, I would stop eating lunch at my desk. I would call my father more often just to hear his voice, not to exchange information. I would stop rushing through the parts of the day that aren't on any agenda. The morning before anyone else wakes up, the walk between places, the conversation that doesn't need to go anywhere. Edmund's point was never that ambition is wrong, or that planning is wrong, or that wanting more is wrong. His point was that a life lived entirely in anticipation of itself is a life that never quite starts. And the shift, the only shift that actually matters, is from treating the present as a corridor to treating it as a destination. You are already in the room. The question is whether you're going to keep pacing the floor waiting for it to look different, or whether you're going to sit down and let it be where you actually are. Now, the question that follows naturally from this is about the things we most commonly use to avoid the present. The very specific ways people stay in the hallway even when they know it's happening. That's the next conversation. If this sat with you in a way you weren't expecting, subscribe. Every week, this channel goes into the conversations most people are saving for later and never quite getting to. The next video is already there waiting. Edmund would probably say something about the irony of that. Go watch it. The present moment, this one, is a good time to start.